Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Rockets. In this episode, I sit down and talk with the president of Huntsville Venue Group, the company behind the venues like the Orion Amphitheater and the soon-to-be redevelopment of the Lumberyard. First off, thank you for taking the time to sit down and talking with me. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, thanks, Clark. Ryan Murphy, president of Huntsville Venue Group, and basically the current GM of the Orion Amphitheater. And yeah, I oversee all the operations. I moved here 3 years ago to oversee the design, development, construction, and now operations of the Orion Amphitheater and all the projects we have going on in Huntsville.
So, like you mentioned, you moved here about 3 years ago. I think you're originally from Florida, and that you actually worked in some amphitheaters in Florida. Can you tell me a little bit about your background and kind of what you were doing in Florida and kind of your expertise, so to speak?
Yeah, so it's an interesting journey for me that I have to think about from time to time how I got here. But it was, I've been interested in music since I was a kid. Very musical family. Was going to concerts apparently when I was in the womb, really remember some of my formative early memories are at concerts. So, my parents were really into music. So as I was a young teenager, I think around the age of 14, I started doing shows in Daytona Beach, Florida, and promoting shows because I was in a band and we couldn't find places to play. So that weren't 18 and up or whatever. So at the age of 14, I started starting to promote shows, book shows, get my friends' bands, inviting bands from all around the state of Florida, like, little punk bands and stuff. And so that led to me discovering a great underground music scene in Gainesville, Florida, which I had already identified as a place I wanted to go for college. So I ended up going to Gainesville for music and for college and stuck around there for a very long time. So long, in fact, I got my master's degree. And, I was really involved with the music scene there. I worked at a independent record label. I opened several venues, worked at venues. I helped book, bartend, operate, some underground cool independent venues there. Yeah. I would help with festivals, all that kind of stuff. So I was there for a long time, and I actually got my master's degree in bilingual education, and it was because I was interested in being a teacher because the music thing, at least on the as a performer, I was traveling for years playing in a band, and that wasn't, paying the bills as much. It was kind of paying the bills, but it wasn't, the future that I necessarily wanted. So I got my master's in bilingual education, and I was working with teachers and specifically working with migrant farm worker children. And there was a huge migrant farm worker population outside of Gainesville, Florida. And I would go and I would work with their children on literacy skills, et cetera. So anyways, long story short, the nonprofit I was working with was called Harvest of Hope, and they were funding these literacy programs. And they were looking to do some fundraising. And someone in the organization, actually the guy Phil who ran it, said, "Ryan, you know a lot of bands. What do you think about throwing some sort of concert?" So we threw a couple concerts, raised a lot of money for this organization. It was fantastic. My friend in St. Augustine, Florida at the time said, "Hey, I just started with St. Johns County, and we just put money into this amphitheater. Do you want to come over and do this big festival?" And blah, blah, blah. So I did a couple festivals via Gainesville to St. Augustine, and through that they offered me a job as assistant general manager of this new amphitheater they had just redone in St. Augustine, Florida. So I took a big leap and moved to St. Augustine. And the day I started as assistant GM at this amphitheater, this brand new, remodeled amphitheater, they told me that they fired the guy that was GM, my friend Ryan. So I said, "What does that mean?" They go, "Well, that means I guess you're in charge now." Yeah. And so I really didn't know much about something of that scale, amphitheater. So I spent, 10 plus years figuring it out. So I was in St. Augustine, Florida, running the St. Augustine Amphitheater. I became director of cultural events for St. Johns County, which means I oversaw the amphitheater, all the festivals that were happening throughout the county, a 900 cap concert hall, which was this converted church, multiple events throughout the year. So, and then the St. Augustine Amphitheater went on and is still very, acclaimed, award-winning, really hot spot for artists touring through Florida. And wow. It's pretty incredible.
I mean, it's crazy that you're just I think that's most people's dream as far as finding something that's their passion that they can also now do for work in some sort of capacity or another. I mean, like it's not necessarily the exact thing that you like. Obviously, you're not touring, you're not in bands anymore, but you're still in the music scene, getting able to like communicate and hang out with these people that are doing what you did before, but you're helping in a different capacity now.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's like people were like, "Well, that's interesting. You were going into bilingual education and working in the school system. You have a master's in that." And I was like, "How that helps now is the fact that there was a lot of bureaucracy involved in the school system, working with the state and the county when I was doing the education thing. That kind of helps when I became a county director in St. Johns County. I was very already introduced to the bureaucratic systems of like how to make things function. And, that's translated to here very well.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that people probably don't see that's behind the scenes that make things happen like that. And like all that. And we'll kind of get into that in a little bit.
Sure.
Because obviously, so you moved here originally in 2019 when you kind of were approached to move to Huntsville. Was that before or after the amphitheater was announced, or did you kind of know about it before everyone else saw?
No, I knew there was already, a nice surge of support here in Huntsville, and all on the heels of the sound diplomacy study that was done, the music audit, that recommended an amphitheater. I know there's some significant people in the community who did a great job of getting the support and saying, "Hey, we need to do this." It then went to the developer. Mid-City and the city itself, and basically we're like, if you want to do this, you got to find someone to kind of build it and operate it. And so around that time, they were talking to some of the big dogs like Live Nation and some of the bigger, promoter agencies and stuff, and they kind of just, I don't even know how it got out there, to be honest. I think it was through sound diplomacy, basically saying, hey, I know some guys who might do this a little differently. Okay. And what they did was Shane Shapiro from Sound Diplomacy sent a note to Ben Levitt, who's my friend and the CEO of the company, and said, you got to come check this place out. So Ben Levitt came, and this was back in 2017, 2017, 2018-ish. And they flew here for the first meeting, met with the city, met with RCP, the developers, and some community stakeholders, and we're like, this is incredible. Basically, so I had met Ben because I had done a festival for Mumford & Sons, the band he's in, and in St. Augustine, and he saw my operations there. We became friends, and he basically was like, I think I have a vision for the amphitheater here, not only design-wise, but operationally, and if it's going to work, I got to get a hold of my friend who's in St. Augustine, who doesn't know anything about this.
Yeah.
So him and my other friend, Mike Luba, who's our partner in it, they basically told me about this opportunity. And I was, needless to say, I was very hesitant at first. I was ready to get out of Florida.
Okay.
So I wanted to make a leap. I didn't know I'd make a leap to North Alabama. And so, very hesitant at first. And then I came here with my family to visit, and we found out, and I met the mayor and John Hamilton and a bunch of the city people and local musicians and a lot of local people. And I said, this community is amazing. Let's do it.
So prior to that, what was your, like, if someone was, you were in Florida, someone was to mention Huntsville, Alabama, or mention Alabama, or primarily Huntsville, what was your, what would have been your first thing you would have said about Huntsville?
Yeah, so I had no understanding of what Huntsville was. So a good friend of mine, Andrew, who had worked at the Orion until recently, he grew up here, and he mentioned it in passing, and I never really thought anything about it. And I was actually, maybe like 5-6 years ago, I was still playing music, and we had traveled through and played a show in Birmingham.
Okay.
And the show itself was great, but we walked around Birmingham, and this is no offense to Birmingham, but we walked around, and it was a really weird night. It seemed really angry. The area of town we are in seemed really beaten up, and it was a bad vibe.
Yeah.
And so that was my take on like that. And then all of lower Alabama, traveling through to get to New Orleans or whatever in Mississippi. So that was what Alabama was for me. So if someone were to say Huntsville, Alabama, I wouldn't have any context for Huntsville. Yeah. I would just say,
it's near Birmingham, so
it's Alabama. So I'm like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
So it's like that was my thing. I was like, I have it figured out, and they go, I don't think you've been to Huntsville, so you need to check it out.
It's a whole different ecosystem in Huntsville than what most people kind of associate with Alabama. Right. And I think that's like, it's cool that once you got here and you saw it and you kind of saw the community, you're like, wow, like this is a whole different thing than what you imagined.
It's not only culturally so much different, but even the topography and like, my family and I live on Montesano. So it's just like, we didn't think we could live on top of a mountain where there's waterfalls and caves and trails in Alabama. That was,
it just didn't,
it didn't register.
Those two things didn't, like, they seemed mutually exclusive almost.
Yeah.
So in 2019, you move here, you start working with the venue group, kind of working on the plans for the amphitheater and stuff. Obviously, at that time, you were really just working with the city, kind of lining up, getting everything worked out with them.
Sure.
How early did you actually start working on scheduling events and having acts? Because I would assume that would be something you kind of have to schedule in advance, because it's looking at tour dates for people, looking at where they're going, and kind of figuring out something that works for the amphitheater.
Yeah, I mean, so what's unique about our organization is we're not just the typical facility management type people. Granted, I am a facility manager and have been for a long time, but I'm very involved in all aspects of music, and especially in the promotion and curation thing. And I'm lucky enough to have a couple really solid partners. Ben Levitt, I mean, him being in Mumford and Sons and the people he knows through that is pretty epic. And then Mike Luba, one of our other partners, he runs Forest Hills in Queens. He's, he's been a tour manager. He's been a manager. He's opened a ton of venues. His Rolodex is very strong. So a year before opening, probably even early 21, I guess at this point, early 2021, we started getting the pieces together to start, basically going out. We were going to actually fly to agents and, artists and stuff, but it was COVID. So we realized we have to get on the Zoom with like literally 200 agents. So you pick any artist you can think of, big, small, especially all the big ones. Think of anyone you can name. And we got in front of either them, their manager, or their agent, and gave the whole pitch on Huntsville, Alabama. And it was a really cool experience. But it was that's how we had to do it. We couldn't just open and hope that people would promote shows there. We knew we had to get really involved because it was Huntsville, Alabama, that people might not know about.
100%.
And then also the uniqueness of the design of the amphitheater, how it was going to be operated. And so there was already, like, we're picking up the phone and we're calling, the easy ones out of the gate were the big ones we got, like Kenny Chesney and Dave Matthews, and some people that we know them. We know we could talk to their people and say, hey, you know us, you can trust us. We're building this wild amphitheater in North Alabama. Will you take a chance on it, and will you help us open it? And it was pretty amazing. So that came together pretty quickly because of who we are and the trust we have in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, I couldn't imagine being at that point when you're in front of either the artists or the agents and you're talking about Huntsville. Because I mean, I bet there was no like, I could imagine you saying, hey, we're opening this amphitheater in North Alabama in Huntsville. It's going to be this great event place, kind of doing the spiel. And then they're thinking, like, the Huntsville doesn't probably click for most people. It's not like music wasn't a Huntsville thing. It was like, hey, it's not Nashville. It's south of Nashville. And it's north of Birmingham. It's south of Nashville, but there's really no music there. Was that a tough kind of like, after you kind of were able to show them the plans, it was probably a little easier for them to say, like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. I'm excited for this. But the original, it was probably like, what, Huntsville?
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. So the deck we have that we would pitch would show not only the, innovation and history and fascinating, like, just everything that's happened in Huntsville with, rockets and NASA and Von Braun. And like, there was such a beyond all that too. And then we'd show the correlation, what was happening in Muscle Shoals around the same time and what that created. And so Huntsville was not just Huntsville, it was North Alabama. Yeah. It was the richness of like all that was happening here. And so people kind of got it. But what was really cool was for the first like couple weeks of us getting on these Zooms and talking to agents and artists and management, Ben and I would spend the first maybe 15 minutes talking about Huntsville, the demographics, that this or that. And people would go, oh, wow. And they'd start to get it. But around that same time is when a ton of like things were coming out about Huntsville, especially, mid-COVID, like how is Huntsville so resilient? Why is this still a great city to move to and be employed in? Those articles were starting to hit USA Today and all the Wall Street Journal and all this stuff. So all of a sudden it's like people tapped in pretty quick. So a week or two into us giving these pitches, people go, yeah. You can skip over the Huntsville stuff. We know about Huntsville.
Wow.
So like, I think, development and finance and innovation and technology and all the stuff that's happening that, COVID kind of was shining a spotlight on Huntsville in so many ways, and actually helped us because people go, whoa, we don't know what's going to happen to the music industry. You know,
Yeah.
we don't know with touring artists. And here we are building this 8,000 seat outdoor amphitheater. And people go, wow, if you guys feel good about this, we want to see what you're up to.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's crazy is like you're pitching them on something that you knew nothing about 2 years ago. Like Huntsville was something that was foreign to you as far as like what was there and what the ecosystem, what the culture looked like, what the community looked like.
Yeah.
And now you're pitching it to people that 2 years, 3 years later already kind of starting to hear about Huntsville through these articles and through these other resources.
Sure. And I think, you know, that was a big part of me moving here with my family in 2019. And I'm so glad the city supported it because it was 3 years before we even had our first show, right?
Yeah.
But the point was, I like to get very involved in like some of the local music and art scene. I like to know the local venues. I know, like, I just, within the first year of being here, I just fell in love with the place and knew it. And, you know, we call Huntsville home. Like, we're not going anywhere. You know,
Wow.
We love it here. And that was something, we weren't just moving in. We weren't carpetbagging as far as like coming in and just taking an opportunity. And I think other people could have, would have, and that's fine. But it's like my heart was in it from the beginning.
So after about 4 years of working with the city and getting all the plans together and the construction was finally completed for the Orion Amphitheater, you actually opened the doors on May 6th with the first waltz. Can you tell me a little bit about that preparation and what it looked like that first week leading up to that huge milestone for Huntsville community, as well as some of the lessons you learned when that first opening happened?
Yeah, it was actually, that first weekend wasn't actually First Waltz. It was the Huntsville Hospital Classic.
Okay.
And that was a fundraiser event that the hospital does. That's great. And that was with Jake Owen. So that was kind of, not so much a soft opening as it was like, we're opening the doors. We've only had our CO for about 24 hours. So bear with us. It was like a pretty insane test run. So, leading up to that was insane. It was literally insane because, you know, we pushed really hard to make that date work. And, you know, I'm sure we made a lot of people angry in the process, which is fine. But, you know, we knew we had to have that fundraiser. We knew we had to have Jake Owen play and, you know, the thousands of people. I think there was like 3,800 people there that first night, which is pretty amazing. So that event was great. And it was that following weekend, the 13th, 14th, 15th of May, that was actually the first waltz weekend. So we got to open with the Huntsville Classic, have about 4 or 5 days of like, oh man, here's what we got to do before we have, you know, 20,000 people here this weekend.
Yeah.
So it was a good way to kind of stack it because right after first waltz was Dave Matthews and Kenny Chesney and some of the big dogs. So yeah, leading up to that was insane. You know, we had construction trailers and we were on site every day, you know, but we had to move, you know, 100 bartenders, 50 staff, all the guest services people. Like we were literally having the first show and most of us didn't even know the building. Like if someone goes, hey, where's the nearest bathroom? You know, it's like
I'm not
we're
too
learning.
sure.
Yeah. So somehow, and I think it speaks well to the culture of the team and the management. It's like everyone handled it really well with a huge smile on their face. Everybody was excited. The audiences were excited. So we didn't even have to say, hey, be patient with us.
Yeah.
We're still figuring this out. It's just right out of the gate. Everybody just jumped in and was learning together. And like it's a big facility and it can be pretty daunting. So that's like front of house. So all the bars did great. All the bartenders did great. Security, guest services, the box office, all of that went swimmingly for the fans.
Wow.
And then what was great on the other end was the artists, starting with Jake Owen, leading into First Waltz, Dave Matthews, etc. Every single artist were like, this is like no other venue. This is like one of the greatest venues we've ever played. This is the greatest experience we've ever had. So they say it from stage every time now. They're saying it to us backstage. They're telling their agents. We're getting the feedback. Like, so that really helps. So I think really nailing it on the guest services side with the fans and that experience. And then we're also getting some really great feedback from the artists. And that to us, that's how this venue will live and breathe and be sustained is if the artists love it, they're going to keep wanting to come back and they're going to tell their friends. It's not just a payday.
Yeah, I mean, like, so at the time of this recording, with a little over 2 months or so with the amphitheater being opened, you've seen acts such as Josh Groban, Hank Williams Jr., Neil deGrasse Tyson, Dierks Bentley, Kenny Chesney, and Jake Owen, to name a few. You mentioned a little bit about how you originally were going out to kind of find these musicians, these acts to kind of perform. Has that process changed since the opening, or is that how does that process work for you now?
it's changed. It's evolved a bit because I think, we're so dedicated to have a diverse programming. And I think it's an easy layup to kind of get some of the big country ones. And like I said, some of the phone calls we could make, like to Dave Matthews Camp and Kenny Chesney and some of the people like Widespread were like, yeah, we can do this. This is an easy one. Some of the ones that took a little more convincing, like Josh Groban had never played in the state of Alabama.
Wow.
So his first experience was the Orion. And, he said from stage, this is the most beautiful, most amazing sounding venue I've ever been in. And he meant it. He kept on talking about it days later and sent us notes and everything, which is pretty phenomenal. So what's different about now is that I actually have testimony and I have pictures and videos and I have things to show other artists to go, no, it's a real deal. You got to check it out. And they go, oh, we've heard. And so it's, Chris Stapleton was last week, and I feel anyone from Nashville was there. It was pretty interesting to see all the agents and managers and going, wow, we've been hearing about this place for the last 2 months, and wow, it's no joke. And so it's gotten a little easier in that way. So 2023 is going to be pretty massive. Like our calendar is already pretty insane. So I think we did a lot of the big push, but now on the other side of it, to the first point I was making is that we have to make sure we're diversifying, getting the big Nashville agents, guarantees you a lot of the huge country acts, which is great. But we're making sure we're having a lot more, like we want to get more comedy or metal or hip hop or, or symphony acts or like the things that we want to diversify more and more. That's going to continue to be like an ongoing thing because having a big outdoor amphitheater is hard.
Yeah.
It's not, with the VBC, it's easier. They have flexible indoor space and a little easier for them to program in that. But like for Neil deGrasse Tyson, for instance, he was scared to do it, or he was, hesitant at first because he goes, it's outdoors. What if it rains? I said, don't worry about it. And sure enough, we had to postpone it because it rained. And, it ended up being a great show anyways, but there's some like the big comedians or some of the big symphony acts and stuff. It's hard to do those outdoor, events.
Yeah. So when you're looking at these, like you said, you've kind of done some of these big country acts that kind of have like you've reached out to this Kenny Chesney's and you've gotten them, and then now you've kind of expanded from there. Right. And then you've got the Josh Groban, you kind of expand from there, and you've got the Neil deGrasse Tyson, you're kind of expanding from there.
Sure.
Is that the kind of the mindset that you work when you're trying to find these acts in these different genres, that you want to kind of have the experience at the amphitheater, that you try to pick one person in that sort of realm and then try to get them, or do you just try to hit a few different people and hope?
Yeah, I mean, it's a mix. We stay pretty in tune with everyone's traveling schedules. We'll know some tours coming up earlier than other people, obviously, and agents will reach out to us, or people will say, hey, we got to play here. For instance, there's sometimes it's as organic as there's an artist, Maggie Rogers. She's phenomenal. She put out a record just recently. She was at First Waltz and she's like, I got to play this place. Like, this place is most amazing. So she tells her agent and her manager, they call me, and I'm like, that's great. She's, she's pop. She's like, she's fantastic. So I get like her, and then I start like building off of that. So to your question, yeah, I kind of look at it as genre and how do I build off that genre and kind of even diversify within that. But then where are the gaps? Where am I missing? Where is the comedy is one of those things where I'm like, I want to see a big comedian here because that'd be really cool. Some sort of big comedic act. And so we keep pressing on, and, you got to keep in front of people, because even though we're an awesome venue that everyone's talking about within the industry, which is great, they still, they have a job to put their artists all around the world. They're not just talking about us. So it is that constant reminder, like, don't forget about us. Oh yeah. Like, we got to make sure we're putting our great acts. And the thing that's nice is there's a big litmus test for like, artists and venues, and Dave Matthews and Kenny Chesney. I keep on going back to them because they're artists who will talk a lot about the venues within the industry. And so, and we know them well enough to where we said the whole day of and the night of, and as they left, we said, poke holes in all of it. Like, what are we doing wrong? What did we
Please
miss?
give us advice.
Give us
much feedback as possible.
Yeah, Hank Williams' camp was a junior's camp was like that as well. Even Josh Groban's camp and Chris Stapleton's camp, like everyone were like, we want you to have the best experience ever. Tell us if we've missed anything. And, everybody's been really candid, and we've gotten it 99.9% right, which is pretty incredible, so that's the resounding feedback. But yeah, I take these artists and I go, hey, if Dave Matthews is playing here and having a great time, surely your artists, that you represent or you work with would also have a great time.
Yeah, and I bet like within that industry, with all those agents, I mean, as they see these musicians that are in the same sort of genre as their musician that they're an agent for play here, they see, okay, here's how their experience was. Let's either reach out to them, they're a good friend, or let's reach out to the amphitheater itself. Yeah. And it kind of has that process.
It's right. So it's 50-50. If I stopped picking up the phone to call people and actively stay in front of people, we wouldn't see the diversity or the kind of the unique curation that we're going to start leaning into. It'd still be fine. Yeah. We'd still get shows, but there's a lot of facilities that they just wait for the phone to ring and they answer and they go, oh, your artist is coming through. Yeah, we'll hold the date. I've never been like that. And in St. Augustine, I was very hands-on in that way as well. So that kind of goes to also, it's like, everybody hears that, Ben being in Mumford & Sons, one of the largest bands in the world, for a long time, he has a perspective of how to be treated as an artist, what he wants the venue to feel like, and what he wants the day to feel like, and what he wants the fan and artist experience to feel like. So you have that side, and that builds, that buys a lot of trust. When people go, oh, the guy from Mumford & Sons, Ben, he was part of designing and running this place. And then they go, well, Ryan, who, we know him from St. Augustine, and what a great time we always had when we went there. It was very artist friendly. It's very like, we just lean into people having a great time. And that's something I'd be remiss in not saying. It's that we really lean into the experience of North Alabama. So all of backstage is decorated in a like 1960s NASA / Muscle Shoals era vibe. Wow. And it's really cool. And we actually have furniture from NASA that they gave us that they were going to get rid of, but there's like a large conference table in our office actually that's a huge conference table from NASA that all the rocket scientists were sitting around 1960 whatever. Yeah. And so it's pretty incredible. We have a lot of that furniture. We have a lot of if you're backstage, it tells the story of North Alabama in the late 1960s. And not only that, but we offer collaboration with Space Camp. Some of the artists can go to Space Camp. Some of the artists can go to Muscle Shoals Sound Studio or Fame. And so we're showing them, like, if the artists come here, they get a taste for North Alabama, and they go, wow, Huntsville's a really cool place.
Yeah, and I think that's the transition I think Huntsville is starting to make, is that it's not just Huntsville, it's North Alabama. There's so much, it's, hey, Huntsville's kind of the hub, but there's so much, the amount of growth that's happening to Muscle Shoals and Guntersville and Scottsboro and everywhere in between is incredible. And I think it's due, in fact, to just what's happening in Huntsville and just the expansion that it's offering. Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit about the acts and kind of like what 2023 looks like for the amphitheater. Yeah. How much of the scheduling of 2023 do you know behind the scenes versus how much, like when will it be announced to the people that are listening versus like how much do you actually know already?
Yeah, so I know a lot already. I know all of it as far as who we're holding and like the dates we're holding, and what we have to wait for is we hold multiple dates as artists are figuring out their tour schedules. So sometimes we're holding multiple dates, sometimes we're holding weeks at a time to see like where they're going to land as they're routing their tours. A lot of tours like being announced like later in the fall before Christmas, and then some will wait till the spring. Okay. There's usually a dry season between, December, January. It kind of gets a little dry as far as tour announcements. So hopefully we're announcing some 2023 stuff in like October, November, and then, really hitting in the spring. We don't announce all at once because, people's tours don't announce all at once. For sure. So that's something that I think people all the time, it's funny because we'll announce like 3 things and they go, oh, is that it for the year? And it's like, no, there's a lot more coming. Like, so we're still announcing stuff for this year coming up in the next few weeks. Okay. So there's still stuff that's to be announced that's happening at the Orion. That's pretty amazing and pretty exciting. And we're going to be announcing that in the next couple of weeks.
So is there since it is an outdoor amphitheater, is there a lull in like the winter time from like acts? Like is it kind of like that December to February kind of a lull, and then you start back up in March? Is that kind of what it looks like?
Yeah, that's actually spot on. So, and I think what you'll see is this year's a little bit of an exception, but I think next year a little slower in the summer too because it's so hot. Yeah, and I think the heat is even more. It affects it more than the cold.
Interesting.
So it's like because you think about some of these acts that are from up north, they go, yeah, it's 50 degrees. Like, we'll come down and play or whatever, so it's not snowing or, I think January and February, we're not going to have any programming, but starting March, April, we'll ramp up again. But during those, some of those bumper months, like especially November and December, we're going to have a lot of like holiday festivities. We're going to be doing a lot of local programming, more kind of just, festivals and markets.
Just going to get more and more people to see the amphitheater. Because like not everyone can be able to go to a concert, but having like a open admission. I know there's like a retro
record fair.
Yes, happening in October, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. So all the kind of stuff like that is great. And those things are fun. So you don't need to just be a paying customer to go see a concert. Like ideally, and the reason we have this contract with the city is because the city owns this venue. The city of Huntsville taxpayers own this venue, and it's part of the park that's going to be all along west of Mid-City. And so on any given day, if we don't have a concert, we will be open, and we're developing even more and more, and we're building it right now. We're going to have some F&B offerings, some cool little bars, and we have a big dome we built. It's a big covered area that can cover like probably 600-700 people. Wow. And so we can have shows there. We can have small like stage like stuff. People can rent it, all kinds of stuff. But we're going to start having more and more stuff. And in fact, this week, huge art installations are being put in, and it's going to be really cool to see people respond to that. And I just want people to come out and, it's still a construction site out at Mid-City because of the park and everything going on in the development. But, in a year or two from now, I think it's going to be so different because people are going to treat Mid-City just like a downtown area, right? And they live, work, play out there. And I think they go, hey, let's go get a taco and a glass of wine or a beer or whatever, and let's go hang out over at the Orion, or let's walk around the park. So ideally, on any given day, concert or no concert, people have the ability to just, come and enjoy the space.
Yeah, which is like you said, there's so much that's happening and like out there becoming its own ecosystem of entertainment and everything out that's going on out there. I want to switch topics just a little bit.
Sure.
And talk a little bit about Lumberyard, which is another venue that y'all recently got, probably a few months. I guess it was like spring, I guess, is when the announcement came out. And this venue is a little different, has been different iterations over its time. What interested the venue group to kind of acquire this venue?
We've been sitting on it for a while now. There's some construction going on, and we still have a tentative timeline and when we're going to open. But what interested us was how insane it was, and how interestingly insane it was. So when Ben would come and visit, so Ben, love it, and some of the team have opened venues over in London, and part of that London venue group, those projects are built into some of the archways under the rail system in downtown London. And it's utilizing space that otherwise wouldn't have been used, or it's kind of wasted space in downtown. Ben built a amazing small club called O'Mara, and he built it under one of those archways, and he put food and beverage around it, and it's really unique. And he went into Goods Way and Flatiron Square and these cool little places all around there. And so that what he was doing in London, what they're still doing in London, is very reminiscent of what the Lumberyard is. So there was a time a year or two ago where Ben was visiting, and we were popping around. We were actually looking at the old Mercantile building. We were looking at taking over that. That was something, we've talked to a lot of people around town about different projects. We still are. And when at some point someone was like, hey, do you want to go to this place called the Lumberyard and grab a drink? And I was like, oh yeah, I heard that place was kind of funky. It was like, whatever. And we went in there and we're like, what is this? And we just and the owner, Doug, kind of, was smitten with Ben and was just like, come see my studio, come see this. And so he kind of showed us around, and we're like, wow, this place is just like, not only has a really unique history over the last however many decades Doug's owned it, but I was like, what potential, like what a cool area of town. At the time I lived right there on Walker, right around the corner. So I was like, I've always wondered about this place.
Like it's like from the outside, it's like you want to ask the question, like, what is this? Especially for someone that's like there, that's not from Huntsville, is just not aware of it as much. And then you go inside and see the space, you're like, this is incredible. Yeah,
this is incredible. There's a 1923 like dining car like sitting in the middle, and just the space itself. I was like, Ben, what we could do with a place like this. He's like, oh, I know. So, we started courting Doug into taking the place over. And, Doug has since retired, and now we've now taken it and it's ours. And we have some really exciting plans for it. We're leaning into some of the stuff that was really cool with the lumberyard, like the kiln, that, front bar space, the courtyard, the train car. But then what we're doing that's significant is we've blown out the front end of it that's on Meridian, that side. And we've turned those two retail spaces into what's going to be a 350 cap club venue.
Wow.
And it's going to be beautiful. And it's called the Meridian Arts Club. And that is what's going to be exciting and opening here in the next, 6 months or so.
Wow. And like, I would, anyone that's listening, I would highly recommend checking out their website, the venue, the TVG Hospitality's website, and looking at the lumberyard. They actually have renderings on there.
Yeah.
And I recently, probably in the last few weeks, I guess when we originally were going to do the podcast a couple weeks ago, looked at those renderings, and it just is incredible just to see this other thing that's coming to Huntsville that has so much history in Huntsville, but it's kind of getting a new look and a new feel in an area that it's just growing like crazy. I mean, y'all have venues in two areas that are just booming. And you mentioned a little bit just about, looking at other venues. Is there thoughts on having more than just the two you currently have?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, that's an important piece of, as well as the contract we have with the city. We always came here not with the intention of just opening the amphitheater and sitting there and waiting to see what happened. Our promise to the city, to the community, and to ourselves was we're going to help build an ecosystem. And that ecosystem is going to, obviously be inclusive of what the VBC is doing, what venues like Sidetracks are doing, like all the local venues as well. Mm-hmm. We're going to kind of work within it and identify, okay, what's the next step? What's the, capacity that's needed? What's the format that's needed? How can we invest in this? So, we're working on behalf of the city of Huntsville for the Orion, but the lumberyard is, purely ours. And so, but we're adding into, we're going to keep investing into Huntsville and building these venues. And, currently we have about 2 or 3 other venues where we're actively looking at to build and work with people in Huntsville. So it's exciting.
Yeah. And I guess with these different venues, you push acts through these venues that best fit the kind of either the musician they are, the space that they're in, and kind of having these different venues and these different styles, different sizes allows you to kind of really work with artists and kind of push them through the ecosystem that you're creating.
So you have 2 things there. If you have a healthy ecosystem of, a venue that has 50 people, all the way up to 10,000 people. And you have everything in between. You have a few hundred, you have 1,000, you have 2,000, you have 4,000. You can build up and you can build down. So when an artist is, getting popular and they're traveling through, but also there's a lot of artists, a lot of people's favorite artists might have been huge 2 years ago, and now they're playing half the size audiences, but people still want to see it. There's no reason for someone to skip Huntsville, other than maybe the capacity is not there, right?
Yeah.
Or they're pushing it, or it's an underplay for them. So there's that piece. You got a lot more opportunities for traveling artists to take a chance and come to Huntsville and might not have before, like a Josh Groban, for instance. And then on the other side of it, it's the ladder that's needed to get local artists who want to find a way to build on audiences and kind of get out there and start traveling. And so if there's an artist who's just packing it out at a 100 cap venue, well, then let's start doing showcases at the 200-300 cap venue, and then let's grow. And that artist now is getting the chops to get out there and start hitting the road. Next thing you know, they're opening for, whatever band that's coming through the Orion, and then, this or that. So the idea is to kind of help lean into that local music community. So that's the music side of it. But there's also the tech side of it, which it's just like there's a ton of people that want to learn the music business and be in the music business, but not necessarily an artist.
Yeah.
So if someone's like, I want to learn how to run the front of house boards, or how to be a stagehand, or how to book shows, or how to be marketing, or any of those things. So now if we're building this ecosystem, we're giving a ton of different opportunities for people to learn how to get into the music industry too.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the interesting thing, and it kind of shows your transition or your kind of thing within the music industry yourself, because it shows that you were playing those acts, and now you're being able to manage it and being able to communicate and grow this ecosystem. How much is it for the Huntsville Venue Group for y'all to look at what's happening in other cities around you and what acts they're getting? Like, how much does that play a part?
A little bit. It's interesting. We have an office in Nashville as well, and I go up there and from time to time, and I meet with a ton of people in Nashville. And it's its own beast. Like, we watch it. And it's interesting. We're close with things happening in Birmingham and throughout Alabama. But I think the most interesting to us is we watch what happens in Atlanta. I think that's a funny thing. And I talk to, whether it be Devin Keith or some people in the city council or city administration, it's like, especially when people were like, oh, you're moving to Huntsville, Alabama. Oh, look how close it is to Nashville. You guys are going to just be a mini version of Nashville, or maybe you're the Nashville feeder thing, or blah, blah. They kept on saying Nashville, Nashville, Nashville. And I was like, I think they're looking at it wrong, because we can be parts of Nashville. But I think it's way more interesting to look at an Atlanta, or we can look at a New Orleans, or we can look at these different places. And then we get to be, we're not going to be the next anything. We're going to be the next Huntsville.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that we kept on pushing. Like, oh, you guys, we hear about the tech and we hear about the music. Are you guys the next Austin? It's like, well, we have projects and we have an office in Austin. We know Austin well.
Yeah.
Huntsville's not the next Austin. Huntsville's the next Huntsville. And that's the exciting part.
Yeah. And I think what's cool is just seeing how the music scene in Huntsville is one and the same of what is happening in Huntsville as a whole. Like, you're continuing the legacy of Huntsville within these venues. I mean, you're keeping the history, you're keeping the legacy, you're keeping the space program, which is big for Huntsville. I mean, it's what Huntsville got on the map to begin with.
Yep.
But then also adding these elements of music and the music scene that's kind of is still an unknown thing for most people, that they don't associate it with Huntsville. But I mean, soon. I think we're right on the cusp of it, where it's like, it's Huntsville and music. It's Huntsville and these huge venues, these new developments, this is Huntsville.
Yeah, and it's, there's a lot of people paying attention. We're working with the state too, because the state is recognizing that, oh wow, Huntsville's really helping put Alabama on the map for music. Mm-hmm. When you think of Alabama, other than the band Alabama, you don't necessarily think of music right away until someone goes, that's where Muscle Shoals is, or that's where maybe your favorite artist, whether it be Jason Isbell or blah, blah, they're from there. And I think people go, oh, Alabama does have a rich music history. That's kind of that's kind of buried in the history of Alabama. So I think the state is excited to get it behind. They're very supportive. The state's been, the state tourism board, the governor, everyone's been very supportive of this project, because I think it shines a new light on Alabama too. Like, wow, Alabama's music as well.
And it's crazy just to, I think some people don't associate, like you said, those musicians that they know of as like, hey, they're from Alabama, they're from Huntsville, they're from Birmingham, they're from these places. But then as the music scene's continuing to grow in North Alabama, I mean, it's going to be like one and the same. The association is going to be so much easier. And
so I think, we skipped over it a little bit with the First Waltz, but that's exactly what the whole point of First Waltz was. Those were all Alabama specific artists. And even some of the people, like, I have no idea that, Emmylou Harris was from Alabama, or, we put that together to tell a quick little story. And there's many chapters in all of that, but we wanted to highlight, hey, there's a lot of really cool music history happening here. Yeah. And, even just having Brittany Howard headline that Saturday night, and she told a cool story. She was telling us about how, Madison Square Mall that was there. Mm-hmm. She was like, when I was a teenager, I was coming over to the mall to buy my first CDs and was listening to all these artists. And here I am playing this,
Yeah. Well, it's like, it almost just gives you chills just thinking about, like, even just saying it, it's like, wow, like that's just absolutely crazy just to think about. And like the full circle of this.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was people crying that whole weekend. It was like, we did not think this was possible.
It's like, this is not the response we were thinking, but this is also like, this is super cool to see. Mm-hmm. Looking at your journey over from Florida, working in amphitheaters, to, being a musician in bands, to now being in Huntsville and managing what you're doing at the amphitheater, how much of your success would you contribute to being in the right place at the right time? And how much would you contribute to your hard work?
That shifts with the way I'm thinking, because I think I get mad sometimes when people go, man, you're just one lucky guy. You keep on and I'm like, you know what? I do work my butt off. So there is part of that. I'm not just stumbling through this.
For sure. It's not 80% luck, 20% hard work.
No, exactly. I think it's been interesting. I think I've always put myself out there, and that's part of it, right? Like, I'm always there for the opportunity. So I think there's been luck involved, because right time at the right place, but it's because I'm working hard to be in that place at the right time. So it's like, whether it be the the stuff I was doing with music or even with my educational career and venue management and stuff, I just kept on putting myself out there. So for instance, the whole reason I'm here is because my friendship with Ben Lovett, and that's only happening because I did a festival for Mumford & Sons. I did that festival because I fought really hard to have that festival happen in St. Augustine. They only were choosing 3 or 4 cities around the world. It was called a Gentleman of the Road Stopover Tour, and they'd pick a city, like kind of a smaller city, and they'd take it over for like 2 or 3 days. And the whole city would like decorate and really get behind it, and it would be a huge citywide celebration. Well, St. Augustine was on a list with, like 50 other cities, and they're only picking 3 or 4. So I knew about it. I met with them, and, I fought tooth and nail to make sure that happened because I thought it would be a great event for St. Augustine. And it was. It changed that city forever. And it led to a ton of great events for St. Augustine. So I'm really proud of it. But because I worked really hard on that, I became really good friends with Ben. My hard work, entrusted him and I together, and when this opportunity came up, he's like, Ryan's got to be the guy. So it's a little bit of both, Yeah,
and I think if you're not like those right time, right moment kind of things are going to fall through the cracks unless you have the hard work to back it up. And like at the end of the day, it's like like these opportunities are really great, and like yes, you can't imagine you got this opportunity, but like the opportunity is only as good as the hard work that you put in to get there. Yeah,
and the biggest piece of that is being not only being willing to fail, but also being okay with like falling on your face and being like, wow, I got that wrong. And I'm just going to stand back up and keep going.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know what I don't know at this moment. Like I've fallen. I don't know what I'm doing, but I've learned so much, and let's just get back up and keep on going.
Exactly right. Yeah.
For anyone that's listening right now and they want to connect with the Amphitheater, they want to connect with what you're doing in the hospitality group, the lumberyard, all that good stuff. Where can people find you online, on your website, on social media?
Yeah, so I think the main hub is just the orionhuntsville.com, and that leads to all our social media. You can sign up there. What's good about putting your email in there, you can email, I think it pops up when you first go to the page, but if you put your email in there, we keep you updated on all the announcements and stuff, and also you get the opportunity to be part of the pre-sale. So for instance, if a huge band's coming and before tickets go on sale on Friday, if you're part of our mailing list, we send you a code, and you can get tickets early. So the orionhuntsville.com is the way to go. And then tvghospitality.com is kind of the mothership of what we're doing around the world. And that is the brainchild of Ben and an amazing team. But that kind of highlights projects that are in development and what we're doing around the world. But it really kind of digs into, like you said, the lumberyard and some other stuff we're doing here. So it's exciting.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me. This has been on my board of people to sit down and talk with for a while. There's just like Orion Amphitheater, someone there. And so I'm super, I just thank you so much for talking with me. It's been great. It's been great seeing kind of like the backstory of it and kind of like behind the scenes, things that people don't really get to hear about. But thank you so much. I continue to look for the success that Orion has, the Orion Amphitheater has, the lumberyard will have, and hopefully all these future venues that you will be opening up soon in Huntsville. And so thank you so much.
Of course, man. Thank you.